Okay, kahit maingay ang broadcast natin, ipagpatuloy natin ang trabaho natin, no? Okay, ang time check, 46 minutos. Okay, pasado po alas 9 na. Okay, anong matawag natin nito, no? Okay, parang mga alas 10 programa po sa pagbabalita, mga suki, no? Okay, hindi na ako mag-explain. Okay, maintindihan nyo po kung bakit ganun, no? Okay, ang kalendaryo natin. Okay, 23 ng Enero 2024. Okay, araw po ng Martes. Gabi po ng Martes ba? Okay, mga nagmamahal sa programa natin, no? Okay, sa lahat po nagmamahal ng programa, huwag kayo matulog muna, no? Ayan. Hey, dito tayo sa Consolidated News natin, panggabi. Okay, kahit medyo malalim ng gabi. Okay, tama-tama pag tapos ng programa ay matulog tayo mga suki, no? Okay, dito po ay sa Halo-Halo Special, Opinion Balita, di ba pa? Kasama po Serbisyo Publiko, Tinig ng Mamamayan. Okay, and then sumbungan ng mamamayan, no? Okay. Ayan. Oy.
Female voice, male voice, lolly voice, monster voice.
Okay, pasensya tayo, ay ganun talaga. Hanapan natin ang paraan paano maayos ito, no? Ayan. Okay, magandang gabi sa inyo. Good evening, good evening. Universal greeting natin. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh, no? Okay, maiba tayo. Hindi muna gera. Ang kasaysayan po, bakit ang sigalot na yan hindi matapos-tapos, no? Okay, pakinggan natin po si Attorney Flo Lumumba po, mga kababayan, no? Isang abogado, African national, mga suki, no? Magaling sa sa kasaysayan nitong si Attorney Flo Lumumba po, mga kababayan, no? Okay, pakinggan natin ang kanyang narrative sa istorya po ng Nakba Darfur Agreement. Okay, dyan po sa pagitan po ng Israel government at saka itong Palestino, mga kababayan, no? Okay, so makinig tayo parehas. Okay, kay Attorney Flo Lumumba, mga kababayan, no? Okay. Gusto ko ito yung mga explanation niya. Okay, kasi siya ay independent din katulad ko ay maghanap buhay po sa online, mga kababayan, no? Okay, si Professor Lumumba, okay, ang kanyang titulo niya ay abogado, mga suki, no? Pakinggan natin siya. Ayan.
The Middle Eastern problem is one that has a long history. But in the context of modern history, we must go back to the Balfour Declaration in 1948 that led to the creation of the State of Israel as we know it today, and to what is normally called Nakba, which is the catastrophe that led to the expulsion en masse of the Palestinian population at that time. So if you want to understand what is happening in the Middle East, it must be understood in that context, and that is what has generated what we see today. So that the Palestinians have since 1948 considered themselves to be an aggrieved people. And the Israeli state, as we know it, has been on the defense, starting with the wars in 1948 and, of course, 1967 and 1973, and the two intifadas, the uprisings. So that you are talking about a Middle East that has been in conflict, pitting Arab countries and Israel. And that is what we see manifesting itself, culminating in the events of the 7th day of October, the year 2023, which has now given birth to what is the war in Gaza, and is one that is not going to be resolved as quickly as we want it to be resolved unless the fundamental and primary issues are dealt with. In other words, we must ask ourselves, what was the original sin that led to this conflict? The situation getting the Israelis and the Palestinians is one that does not lend itself to simplistic answers. It is complex. It is complex, and we have seen it being dealt with in different ways over the years. Those who are objective agree that the best way to address the problem is through the two-state solution. And the two-state solution was a proposal that came out of the negotiation that took place in Oslo, Norway. It was thought at that time that the two parties, namely the Israelis and the Palestinians, would then sit down and agree to ensure that you would have an independent Israeli state which exists since 1948, and have a separate Palestinian state which would exist side by side with the Israeli state. But it has not been easy, because within the Israeli government, there are those who hold the view that the Palestinian state should not exist. And within Palestine, there are those who hold the view that Israel should not exist. So how do you reconcile these two extreme positions? And if you look to the history, people like Yasser Arafat, who was the leader of the Fatah function of what was called the Palestinian Liberation Organization, of the PLO, over time accepted that you could not eliminate the state of Israel. But they are extremists whose clarion call is that we must eliminate Israel. And you see that not only within the states, like Iran, which says, kill the Americans, kill the Israelis, like Hamas, like Hezbollah in Lebanon, like the Houthis in Yemen. That is their clarion call. And in such a situation, Israel is always on the defensive. So going forward, one must then agree that in order to ensure that sustainable peace is achieved, the only thing that we must do as the rest of the world is to midwife a two-state solution. Easier said than done because of the extremists, but I believe that the solution lies in the middle. And the United Nations, in my view, has not played its role as it should have. The Arab League has not played its role as it should have. The Americans, to the extent that they cast their lot with the Israelis, have also in many ways stood in the path of this particular realization, and it is time now that the world must speak with one voice, demanding only one thing: two-state solution. Two-state solution. And that, in the nature of things, will calm down the temperatures and allow the two states to exist side by side in accordance with internationally accepted laws. You know, one of the things that we must say, and say categorically, is that what happened on this, they did. But it is incumbent upon a state, and Israel is a state that was one of the first signatories, if not the first signatory, of the Genocide Convention in 1948. And they did so because the Jews over the years have suffered discrimination. They suffered discrimination in Spain. They suffered discrimination in Germany, and we remember the Holocaust. So that, holding all factors constant, if there is a single nation on earth that should ensure that lives are protected, that the crime of genocide is not perpetrated against any peoples on the ground of their nationality or religion, it is the Israelis. It therefore beggars belief and defeats reason when you listen to senior Israeli government officials, right from the president. President Herzog is on record, and is considered to be one of the more moderate Israelis, is on record as saying, we are dealing with human animals, and we are not going to spare any of them. There is no non-military target in Gaza. In other words, women who are non-combatants are targets, children are targets, the fighters themselves are targets, hospitals are targets. The Israeli defense minister briefly said they will have no fuel, no water, no food. And one even went to the Bible in the book of Samuel and said, just like God ordered that the Amalekites be eliminated, so shall we eliminate the Palestinians in Gaza, that no human being may ever live in Gaza again. Against that background, the reference by the Republic of South Africa to the International Court of Justice is decent, it is understandable, it is acceptable. I've read and reread the 84-page document. It is one of the most well-prepared documentation presenting evidence of what constitutes the crime of genocide. And I believe that all men and women of goodwill throughout the world should support that reference, because that is what international community ought to do in a civilized way, in ways that are recognized and acceptable by the Committee of Nations. I cannot understand Kenya. I would understand Kenya if they condemned the act of Hamas on the 7th of October. But for them to say that we support the disproportionate response by the Israelis is one that defies logic. I don't know what is pushing my beloved Kenya to say that, but it is time that we revised our position. And unfortunately, I hold the view that in matters such as this, it would have been better if the African Union, as the African Union, held an emergency meeting of heads of states and governments so that we have a common position. Because this is critical. It is critical for our trade. It is critical for our relationship with very many countries in the world. And a common African position would have been preferred rather than to allow or individual countries to be manipulated and sometimes even coerced to take the positions that they have taken, and which positions fly in the face of logic. That is one of the busiest maritime routes in the world. You will remember in the year 1956, when there was the Suez Canal crisis, the international trade was disrupted in a fundamental way. And we have seen recently during the war when the Houthis in Yemen have said that they are not going to allow navigation in that area, particularly as regards seagoing vessels that are headed to Israel. And we have seen that it is not possible to get it right all the time, with the consequence that seagoing companies such as Maersk of Denmark have had to suspend almost 95% of their vessels from navigating through that route, which means that you are now taking a longer route. And if you are taking a longer route, it means that you increase the cost of insurance. It means the journey is longer. It means oil is going to become more expensive. And for those countries that are importing oil from that part of the world, it means, therefore, that the cost of living is going to be higher. And it is not something that we ought not to take very seriously, because the implications are dire and grave, and it will be evident in many countries in the continent of Africa, and indeed outside of the continent of Africa. And that is why, therefore, the UN has actually passed a resolution saying that the Yemeni Houthis should not interfere with maritime trade in that particular part of the world. But the Houthis, on their part, have said that we are, in fact, ensuring that international law is given its pride of place by the war and the continuous bombardment on Gaza being stopped. And we now know that it has brought into the conflict, to a certain extent, the Americans and the British, who have bombarded, they say it is very strategic precision bombing on the facilities on the ground, radar and other facilities in Yemen, and even in Sana'a, the capital. And the Houthis have said we are going to respond. And our response is not going to be restricted to the region. It will be in whichever manner that we choose. This is not good. It is not good message. And it is something that could lead to anarchy and undermine trade and affect the economies of many countries in that region and outside of that region. You know, the United States of America has always considered itself the policeman of the world since the 1945. And in many ways, they have said, we are the defenders of the free world. And of course, they are the ones who define what the free world is. We are the defenders of democracy. We have the largest economy. We have the largest army. We, in our estimation, are the strongest militarily on earth. And we, therefore, are the ones who are going to protect the world. And you've seen that the United States of America has, on many occasions, defied the UN. They have, on many occasions, defied the Security Council. They did that, as you know, jointly with the United Kingdom in the case of Iraq. We know they have done that in quite a number of cases, and we know that they are going to continue to do that in order to protect their economy, in order to protect the dollar, and in order to remain, in their view, the hegemon in the world. Is it a good thing? No. It is not a good thing when you have unilateralism, when a single nation, without reference to established institutions, chooses to do things which could undermine international peace. But who can stop them? This is the question. Because many nations, even the strongest nation on earth, which are nuclear armed states are reluctant to get into what would be an Armageddon. China is not prepared to do so. Russia is not prepared to do so. The Western world, of course, is always aligned and are the lapdogs of the United States of America. Iran, beyond the rhetoric, is not prepared to do so because in the fullness of time, even if you think you can win a war, history has taught us that you can win the battle but never the war. The history of Afghanistan told us, the history of Vietnam told us, and the world and the people of the world have no appetite for conflict because it visits pain upon all. But the politicians and the military industry in the United States of America sometimes does not hearken to voices of reason. It does what it does with the consequences that are known to all of us, bad consequences. There are different views about what has happened in Yemen because you remember that strike does then create an environment that potentially could widen the war. The Yemenis have now pronounced themselves, at least the Houthis who run Yemen in practical ways, have now pronounced themselves that the war is not only against the Israelis, but also against the United States of America and the UK. And remember, the clarion call of the Houthis is death to the Americans, death to the Jews. And remember, they also have allies in Hezbollah, which is based in Lebanon. Remember that they are also supported by the Tehran regime in Iran. So it is widening the war by bringing in other players who are not directly involved in the war. And that to me is not a good thing. And one therefore hopes that sooner rather than later, the diplomatic activities that we see in that region, and there have been quite a number of diplomatic activities. We have seen the Secretary of State from the United States of America doing a diplomatic round and visiting the countries, and his message, we don't want the war to escalate. We have seen the Chinese foreign minister is also visiting quite a number of states in that area. And the message that the world is trying to bring about is nobody wants to escalate the war. But you see, when you are dealing with Hamas, when you are dealing with the Houthis, when you are dealing with Hezbollah, you are not dealing with state actors. You are dealing with non-state actors, which do not feel bound by any international law. And they are not some of them are not regular armies. They could do anything, anywhere in the world. And this to me is what makes the whole situation very dangerous and makes the entire world a potential powder keg. They could blow up a civilian facility anywhere in the world. In other words, for them, every place in the world is a potential theater of war. And it is incumbent upon nations and politicians who lead nations to be sensitive to that reality for the sake of international trade and peace. You know, the Red Sea is a very important trade route, and this has been recognized over the years. When the Suez Canal was built, it was recognized that in order to make maritime trade become more efficient, you needed goods to pass through the Mediterranean, the Suez, and then into the Red Sea. In that way, you serve what we call the Eastern Indian Ocean and even go into the Atlantic and the Pacific. And that route does reduce costs in a very, very major way because there are major ports there. You have Asaba, you have ports like Berbera, you have Djibouti, you have Hodeida, many critical ports in that area. And that also is a major oil producing area. So you cannot, for any reason, underestimate the significance of the Red Sea. as a major artery in international trade. And every country in that region must be very worried that in the event of a conflict, even the refugee situation will be exacerbated. We already know that during the Yemeni war, which involved the Saudis and the Yazidis in who are the Houthis in Yemen, we already have a very dire refugee situation in Djibouti. And we already know that there is also some kind of discomfort that exists in Ethiopia between Somalia and the Ethiopians following the signing of this treaty with Somaliland regarding the port of Barbara and some coastline. So that region worries me, and indeed should worry everybody who is looking at the events on the Red Sea. And it is something that should be looked at very keenly, in my view, not only by the United Nations, it should be looked by the GCC countries, and I think the African Union should also focus on it, and the Arab League should also focus on it, Europe should also focus on it. And we are talking about countries in that region and countries that are involved in what is going around in that region that possess nuclear weapons. Israel said, one of the Israeli politicians said, that Gaza is a place where we should use a nuclear device. For the first time, confirming to the world what the world has already and has always known, that they have a nuclear device. Who knows whether Iran has a nuclear device? They possibly do. The British have a nuclear device. The Americans have a nuclear device. And it only takes a simple mistake to then ensure, and I'm using the word ensure deliberately, that the calm and quiet that obtains in the Red Sea is disturbed and disturbed for a long time. And this, I think, is why you see the flurry of diplomatic activity in order to de-escalate the conflict. But the rhetoric from Israel is not helping the situation. And as long as the Americans are urging them on and saying no ceasefire until we determine that we have completely degraded Hamas, we must remain worried. In matters such as these, to be neutral is to be dishonest. And we must condemn the acts of Hamas on the 7th day of October in the year 2023. But we must condemn also the Israelis for their disproportionate response. But you've got to go to the root. What is the root? The root was that in 1948, the British, through the Balfour Agreement, allowed the expulsion of a whole nation, the Palestinians, in what is called the Nakba, the catastrophe. So that the Palestinians have been in a state of siege. They have been in a state of occupation in the manner that African countries were colonized. They have been in a state of apartheid in the manner that the South African blacks were held in apartheid by the white regime. And I cannot help but support the Palestinians as a nation and as a people. But I must condemn elements within the Palestinians who believe that violence will be the only way of solving this problem. So my personal sympathy is with the peoples of Palestine, and my wish is that we create an environment where the Palestinians will have a state of their own alongside Israel. And Israel, in my view, owing to its power that it enjoys today, is capable of facilitating the creation of a Palestinian state. Going back to Oslo and saying, let us have a Palestinian state on the basis of the 1967 boundaries, if that is done, will create a responsible state which is a full member rather than observer at the United Nations, which has international obligations, which, if it misbehaves, will then be dealt with like a member of the International Committee of Nations. But if you retain the current situation where there is no Palestinian state, then organizations such as Hamas, Hezbollah, and many others, which will mutate, will always threaten the peace of Israel. And what Israel deals with as peace will always be peace that means nothing. There'll be no peace that they desire and deserve. In my view, therefore, two-state solution is the answer to this problem. The times have been ending for a long time. I believe this Armageddon kind of thing, which is pushed every other time. I mean, if you look at the history of the world, the end of the Roman Empire was said to be the end of time. Then we had the Millerite end of time in the year 1844. Then we thought that the First World War would be the war that ends all wars. Then we thought 1945 would be the war that ends all wars. Let us remember that as to how and when the war will end is not known to all of us. Our duty is to be responsible, to know that man has now created weapons which are capable of making life on earth to be very difficult. And it is our duty, therefore, to ensure that we never use those weapons against any nation, and that therefore we should aim to ensure that we use institutions that we have created over the years to prevent war. The very reason why we created the United Nations in 1945 after the collapse of the League of Nations was that the world had no appetite for war. But we have seen what has happened since the creation of the UN. And there are many now who are saying that you need to reform the UN, that the UN as it is now is incapable of enforcing the decisions that it makes. We have seen how resolutions have been ignored without consequence. We have seen how wars are being prosecuted, the statements from all these multinational organizations notwithstanding. And perhaps when the wars that are being prosecuted now end, or even before they end, it is the duty of the world to ask ourselves, what have we been doing wrong? What can we do, if not to eliminate war, to reduce war and conflict? Because the pain that it visits on human beings is intolerable.
Okay, tapos na po si Attorney, Professor po Flo. Okay, Lumumba, mga kababayan, no? Ayun po ang makuha natin sa kanya, okay, sa kanyang narrative analysis, okay, sa nangyari po dyan sa okay, sa Gaza, no? Ay, may latest na balita, meron daw nadali mga 24 po ay okay, sundalo po ng Israel po diyan po sa Khan Yunis, no? Yan po ang latest na okay, titingnan natin kung makuha natin yon. Okay, sandali lang, mag-break muna ako mga kababayan, no? Ayan. Yan lang kayo. Ang sa inyo lang na makikinig lang, no? Ang akin mag-research. Ayan. Okay, pakinggan natin ito kung ano ang balita ito. Okay, kung ano ang nangyari po sa Can Yunis. Ayan. Sige lang.
Monster voice. Female voice. Male voice. Lolly voice.
Okay, hanap tayo ng source kung ano po nangyari ito mga suki, no? Ayan. Gera po mga suki, no? Gera. Ayan. Matinding bakbakan mga suki, no? Itong forces po ng Israel at saka sabi rito po ay Hamas. Grabe ang lakas ng mga gamit nila, no? Okay po, matinding bakbakan, no? Ayan. Grabe. Okay, yan po ang latest po, bakbakan po. Okay, sabi rito, Hamas trap Israeli soldier in a house. Okay, blow it up. Ayan po mga suki, no? Okay. Okay, sandali lang. Okay, sunod na marinig natin, itong si President Tayyip Recep Erdogan ay iniwanan po niya ang NATO, yung North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Okay, Turkey leave NATO, will stand on the Red Sea conflict. Pakinggan natin po mga kababayan, no? Okay, and then wala na rin oras. Okay, after ito ay hinto na tayo mga kababayan, no? Ayan.
In a shocking turn of events that sent ripples throughout the international community, Turkey announced its withdrawal from the North Atlantic Treaty Organization amidst a growing geopolitical crisis centered around the Red Sea conflict. This unexpected decision was rooted in Turkey's shifting alliances and its new stance, which prioritized support for the United States and the United Kingdom over the Houthi rebels, thereby defining the expectations and interests of NATO. The decision marked a seismic shift in Turkey's foreign policy and had far-reaching implications for regional stability and global politics. In this in-depth analysis, we will delve into the circumstances that led to Turkey's exit from NATO, the reasons behind its choice of the US and UK, and the potential
Pa-exit po ang
conflict
Turkey po sa NATO, no?
arena. To understand Turkey's decision to leave NATO, it is essential to grasp the intricacies of the Red Sea conflict. The Red Sea, a critical waterway connecting Europe, Asia, and Africa, has long been a hotspot for geopolitical rivalry. In recent years, the conflict has intensified due to the involvement of various regional and international actors. At the heart of the matter are the Houthi rebels in Yemen, who have been engaged in a protracted conflict with the Yemeni government and its Saudi-led coalition allies. The conflict has escalated due to the strategic importance of the Red Sea, with multiple nations seeking to assert their influence in the region. Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates have been leading efforts to counter the Houthi rebels, while Iran has provided support to the Houthi faction. This regional rivalry has drawn in global powers like the United States and the United Kingdom, who have been backing the Saudi-led coalition. Meanwhile, Turkey had maintained a somewhat ambiguous stance, seeking to balance its interests in the region. Turkey's involvement in the Red Sea conflict had undergone significant shifts in recent years, setting the stage for its eventual departure from NATO. Historically, Turkey had maintained a relatively neutral stance in the conflict, advocating for a diplomatic resolution and expressing concern over civilian casualties. However, this neutrality was challenged as the conflict escalated and geopolitical dynamics evolved. One pivotal moment was Turkey's decision to deepen its relationship with the Houthi rebels, a move that raised eyebrows among...
Okay, unahin ko po ito yung latest, no? Israeli Army worst single day loss. Okay, pakinggan natin ito mga kababayan. Unahin natin ito kasi pwede natin balikan yun mga suki, no? Okay.
To their jobs. 350,000 of them were called up from their jobs to go and fight, many of them inside Gaza. You're dealing with Hamas, who's been training for this for years. They know the tunnel system and the streets, the dense streets in Gaza like the back of their hand. So yes, what we're witnessing now on the ground in Gaza is certainly probably the most difficult ground-to-ground fighting for the Israeli army.
Right. And they have been, as this is happening, they've been...
Mahirap na po ang bakbakan, no? Kasi ang battle po ay sa ground na. Okay. Apikihan na po ang bakbakan, no? Ayan.
And what's being said about it?
Bakbakan ng tapangan.
We've had a lot of back and forth over the weeks of leaks of what is being negotiated, what parameters are being discussed, who's put the proposal on the table. The latest that we hear now that was released overnight, leaked overnight, was a deal that Israel is agreeing to, or offering, if you will, 2 months of a pause in the fighting. This is in contradiction, just briefly, that Netanyahu has been so defiant to say no pause in fighting, no end to the war. So the details of the report is this. So 2 months in exchange for a gradual release of all the Israeli captives.
Okay, 24 sundalo po namatay sa isang single day bakbakan mga suki, no? Okay. Sa pagitan po ng IDF at saka itong mga resistant po ng sa ground mga kababayan, no? Okay, i-continue natin. Ayan.
including the bodies of those that are dead, including also the 2 dead soldiers they've been holding since 2014, Hamas has been holding, and 2 captives, Israelis, that crossed the border voluntarily in 2014. So all the Israelis are being considered in this deal. And this is also for, they will be discussing how many captives, 1 captive, how many Palestinian prisoners, sorry. So all of these details are leaking in terms of what's being discussed. What we know, publicly what's being said. Israel's position is, particularly Netanyahu, no end to the fighting, no ceasefire, and we will get the hostages militarily. Hamas has said all along, a total end to the war, and only then will we release the captives. Folly, what gets said publicly and what gets discussed behind closed doors are often very different things. So I think what's clear is negotiations have been ongoing.
Right.
Now these leaks again about specifics. Let's wait and see. We know that Brett McGurk, the U.S. envoy, is in Cairo right now. Discussions are underway. He will be heading to Qatar as well. So we're going to have to wait and see what kind of compromises, if any, get made on both sides.
All right, Stephanie, thank you very much for that. Stephanie Decker reporting there live from occupied East Jerusalem.
Ayan. So, hindi mo masabi po na okay, na tapos na po ang labanan, no? Okay, hindi mo pwede masabi tapos ng labanan. Ibig sabihin, okay, tuloy-tuloy ang labanan, mga suki, no? Ayan. Okay pa? Kasi maikli lang, no? Okay, pa tunog natin ulit yung mga kabayan para maintindihan ba natin? Ayan.
Joining me now is veteran Israeli politician, former Foreign Minister Tzipi Livni. She's known Netanyahu for years, having worked both in opposition to him and in coalition with him. Tzipi Livni, welcome back to the program. Can I start by asking you, are you surprised at this stage, 108 days since the massacre and then the war on Hamas, that all of a sudden this anger, these divisions within the Israeli system are spilling out into the open?
Well, I'm not surprised that the war takes so long because this is an asymmetrical war between the country and the terrorist organization. We are looking for victory, they are looking for survival, so it takes time. But the fact that we have more than 100 hostages that were taken and the statements of Prime Minister Netanyahu about the day after his unwillingness to deal with the different plans that are on the table, including by the United States, create now the division again amongst the Israeli society.
So, were you surprised, like a lot of people were, that Gadi Eisenkot, who's generally very well respected in your country, is a member of the war cabinet, an observer member, made that rather, quite blunt intervention on Israeli television, firstly calling for elections immediately or as soon as possible, saying that the Prime Minister had not been telling the people the truth about what was happening on the ground. Let me just play a small soundbite and have you react.
We need, within a few months, to return to the Israeli voter and go to elections in order to renew trust. Because at the moment, there is no trust.
So why is there no trust? Do you agree with him that there is no trust?
Firstly, I am glad that Eisenkot and Benny Gantz are part of the Israeli war cabinet because I trust them more than I trust the others there. And the moment in which they decide to quit, this is for me a message saying that they are not influencing anymore the course of things. But I think that in these dramatic moments, not only in terms of Israeli politics, but this will define the future Israel's security, the future of Israel and the Palestinians in Gaza. And therefore, I think that we should all focus on what is the alternative for Hamas, how can we keep Israel's security, and how to work with and not against our allies, and first and foremost the United States, that stands with Israel since day one, and offer some ideas about regional security matters. The Saudis are speaking about normalization, and of course, they cannot abandon the Palestinians, but this can create new opportunities for the future. And I'm so sorry that the Israeli Prime Minister, that Netanyahu, is not using this opportunity to create a better future.
Okay, can you explain why? I mean, look, people have known that he has been essentially against a two-state solution from the beginning of his mandate when he first got in power in 1996. But now he's coming out and saying it publicly and saying it in response to, as you say, his biggest backer, the United States, not to mention the entire allies and Western community, and as you said, some of the Arab states which want to normalize with Israel for Israel's security and the like. Why is he saying this? And is it why do you think he's saying this?
Netanyahu tries to divide the Israeli society on the same old campaign. Who is for or against the Palestinian state? He's also saying that the PA, the Palestinian Authority, is like Hamas. They are all the same. So we shouldn't first aid or help or accept the presence of the PA in Gaza Strip, and later to the establishment of a Palestinian state. Now, I do believe that there's a need to take care of Israel's security. This is crucial these days. But the real question, how can we form different security structure regionally? And frankly, when we need to choose who will control Gaza, so the real options are Hamas, no way. Israel doesn't and shouldn't take care of 2 million of Palestinians that are there. We don't want to reoccupy Gaza. We just need to take care of our security. So the third option is a Palestinian regime, whether it's the PA or others, but we need to deal with it. We need to give an answer to this now, because otherwise the Hamas will continue. They can, try to survive the next day to be the regime in Gaza again, and threatens not only Israel, but also the Palestinians in Gaza. And therefore, this is truly urgent to make this decision now. It's not the day after in the future, it's here and now.
So you just said that he and many of his supporters equate the Palestinian Authority with Hamas. I mean, do you believe that to be the case, given the fact that it is the entity, the Palestinian entity, that has recognized Israel, that works with Israel, by and large, for the most part? Is that a smart thing to tell the people of Israel?
Of course, it's not the same, but I would say the following. I'll speak about our interest. It's not for me to choose the Palestinian leadership, but yet it needs to be clear by the entire international community that it's not going to be Hamas or any terrorist organization. And we need a regime that is willing to work with Israel on security and give legitimacy to Israel when we need to fight against terror also within Gaza Strip, and to be responsible to the life of the Palestinians that are there. So whether it's a new PA, renewed PA, a Palestinian Authority or others, it's less important. But these are the parameters, these are the conditions. And for now, the Palestinian Authority is cannot work or fight terror within Gaza Strip. That's for sure, it's too weak. But I think that we need to enter into an interim period of time and try and work together with regional stakeholders, with the United States, to begin these steps toward the future, and without any hesitation.
How do you think that's going to happen if the Prime Minister is just saying no? Who's going to make that happen? And as I said, the pollsters say that he apparently, if it was his Likud party going to elections, he's got like 16% compared, which is like less than half of what Benny Gantz has at about 37%. Who's going to create and enable what you're just saying, the need to work with your partners to create a final peace?
It's clear that for many years, Netanyahu's opponent is now losing in polls, and I do believe that this is the end of Netanyahu's era in Israel politics, and I do hope that those that will replace him from a center part of Israel politics will adapt these views. That is a combination of Israel's security needs with a vision for the future and hopefully a new regional structure.
And can I ask you about the United States? I mean, what is the cost to an Israeli leader, or is there no cost of dissing, rejecting your closest ally, particularly a president who got up and showed the world that he supported Israel in its hour of desperate need, embraced the prime minister himself despite policy differences, supported the right to self-defense, and frankly, the way the war is being conducted, very worried about it now, even calling to stop, quote, indiscriminate bombing. Is there a cost to an Israeli leader who publicly disses the president of the United States?
I do believe that the Israeli public and most of the Israeli politicians truly appreciate the American administration.
Okay, sandali lang, no? Ang Canada stand for two-state solution, no? Okay, later sa geopolitics, yan po ang statement po ng Canada. Okay, pamagitan po ni Prime Minister, okay, itong si Trudeau. Okay. Justin Trudeau, no? Okay. And then itong European Union, ganun din na talagang gusto nila magkaroon po ng two-state solution, no? Okay, si Joe Biden, hindi pa natin alam kung anong kanyang final mensahe. Okay, tungkol po rito, no? Okay, so itong mga sa paligid po ng Palestinian, okay, sa Palestine, particular Palestine, okay, gusto po maging okay, na magkaroon po ng two-state solution, no? Okay, so halos boses po ay ng mga international community ay dapat po magkaroon ng two-state solution, no? Ayan. So isa na ito. Okay, isang dati po ay leader po ng no? Sino ba ito? Si Tibitsi? Okay, si Tibitsi ba ito? Okay. O si Libni. Ayan. Pakinggan natin po mga kababayan ng katapusan nito.
Tradition who stands with Israel since day one, trying to help share or show deterrence to others, including Iran and Hezbollah, that at first we all were worried that this can turn into a regional war. And this is the right thing when these horrors, Hamas as a terrorist organization did these horrors, and we are grateful. And in a most appalling way, it looks like the American president is doing the right thing without taking care of his own internal politics, while the Israeli prime minister is just thinking about his own politics without taking care of Israel's security needs as he should. And therefore, it's not just about being polite, but it is also about Israel's security needs. We need the United States. It's part of Israel's strategic security needs. And therefore, Netanyahu's campaign is, I'm the only one who can say no to the international community, including the United States. And I believe that we need a leader who knows how to work with the United States and our allies in defining Israel's security needs and working together with them. And this is missing these days.
So, Zipi Livni, you just questioned Netanyahu's self-described role as Mr.
Si
Security.
Libni pala, no?
Many Israelis
Former
question
Prime
it,
Foreign Minister.
and we've seen the polls. But I want to ask you this.
Si
Gary
Libni.
Eisenkot said it is time to tell the people the truth about the war on Hamas, that there's still 2/3 of them, at least by your own calculations, still are surviving. But most, or maybe more importantly for the people, is the fact that, the military might, as we are told, has not brought back your hostages. most people believe that it was a negotiation, it was a deal, it was, there was a pause, and you got back half the hostages, half of them remain. What do you think is, it looks like Israelis believe that too. I mean, they went into the Knesset today.
I think that there is no Israeli who is not thinking now about 1-year-old hostage that was taken with his parents and his brother, and about the hostages. And this is the most important goal of this war. But it's also clear that we can't afford Hamas as a regime the next day. And therefore, what I'm suggesting, and we all support the war against Hamas, but I do believe that since we don't want to see them, and nobody wants, as a regime, the idea of working together with deciding now who's going to replace them can lead to a deal on the hostages and also another regime at the end of this war, the sooner the better. But the war is being supported as the need to release these hostages because on one hand, you have Israel's security. On the other, it's about Israel's solidarity, which is part of our strength. And we need to do it, we need to have both.
Okay, parang may chance. Okay, may chance po. Okay, magkaroon po ng ayan, meron po chance magkaroon po ng tigil putukan itong mga kababayan, no? Okay, base po okay sa interview po, no? Okay, ni Amanpour. Okay, at saka itong si former foreign minister po si Libni. Okay, parang may mga picture. Okay, napipicture out na magkaroon po ng kapayapaan itong mga kababayan, no? Positive na kapayapaan. Kaya problema lang itong kasalukuyan leader, pero kinukonsider na nila ay wala na. Okay, talagang tapos na po ang kapangyarihan po ito ni Benjamin Netanyahu, no? Okay. So, antay tayo, no? Okay, kasi ang buong mundo, okay, parang namulat. Okay, dapat po magkaroon po ng two-state solution, no? Okay, itong mga Palestino, no? Pero ang pinag-usapan nila ngayon na itong Hamas, mga suki, no? Okay, na parang hindi sila papayag po pag namuno pa rin ng Hamas. Okay. Parang wala silang tiwala sa Hamas, no? So paano pag form ng interim po government? Kung sakali man magkaroon po ng interim government, okay, pino-form itong Hamas, itong bagong pamahalaan po ng itong Palestino, mga kababayan, no? Okay, so paano ba ipo-form yan? Paano po magkaroon po ng interim committee muna, mga suki, na? Okay, para may balik ang kapayapaan. Iyon po ang tanong natin. Okay, sa mga expert po sa kapayapaan, mga suki. Okay, malalaman natin. Okay, sa sunod na mga araw, sa sunod na mga linggo, sa sunod na buwan, okay, magkaroon po ng kalinawan. Okay, magkaroon po ng malinaw. Okay, itong problema po, mahigit na po, ilang days na ba? Mahigit 100 days na, no? Ayan. Okay, wala na tayong oras. Sobra-sobra na, mag-overtime naman ako. Okay, wala muna ko news. Okay, dito sa local, tutukan natin itong problema po, mga kababayan, na? From time to time, kung anong may contribute natin, na? Okay, sa kapayapaan, ay hindi tayo titigil po, mga kababayan, hanggat hindi matapos itong problema ito, no? Okay, titigil lang tayo. Okay, kung hindi na po ay impyerno okay, ang bansang Gaza Strip, mga kababayan, saka bansang itong mga West Bank, okay, mga lahat-lahat na ba dito sa Palestine. Okay, patigil tayo kung subaybay yan. Okay, kung heaven na po ang bansang lugar na Palestine, mga kababayan, na matagal na away, okay, wala pong katapusan. So yon ang promise natin habang nabuhay tayo. Okay, patigil tayo mag-monitor yan. Kung okay, surga na po, heaven na po ang Israel, ang bansang Palestino, mga kababayan, na kung heaven na sila. Kung hindi pa, manatili po ang programa ito. Okay, nagsubaybay sa kanila po, mga kababayan. Kasi api sila. Okay, mahigit na 70 taon, 75 years ba? 75 taon ang mga tao ito ay aping mga kababayan. No? Okay, yan po ang promise natin. Okay, patuloy tayo magsubaybay ng kaganapan. Okay, patungkol dyan po mga suki sa bakbakan niya. Okay, ayan. So, parang may puwang, no? Okay, sinabi ni Amanpour at saka itong si Libni, parang may puwang po ang usapan na mapabuti. Ayan. Palagay ko ito sa Amanpour, hindi nakapag-asawa, no? Okay, dahil po sa pagbalita niya, pag-cover po ng mga international, mga critical balita, hindi nata nakasawa ito si Amanpour, no? Okay, manatiling dalaga at ito mga suki, mga kababayan, na. Ayan. Si Christian Amanpour. Ayan.
Monster voice, female voice, lolly voice, monster voice.
Awesome! 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 Awesome!
Okay, pagkatapos ito, magpaalam tayo dito po sa Consolidated News natin, ADLSNTV Corporation platform natin online. And then, sa programa lang po mga kababayan, halo-halo special, opinion, balita at iba pa. Kasama po sa serbisyo publiko, tinig ng mamamayan. And then, sumbungan ng mamamayan. So, marami ng sumbong ang mamamayan, okay, sa programa natin, no? Okay, so, yan ang promise ng programa hanggat makaya niya. Okay, matigil lang mag-broadcast kung surga na po ang Palestine, mga kababayan, na. Okay, surga na. Wala nang mga pumapatay sa kanila mo po, mga kababayan, no? Okay, yan po ang promise, okay, sa public service, itong programa po, mga kababayan, no? Okay, okay, yung mga, pwede ako nyo mga contribution ba? Okay, pwede nyo ipadaan sa GCash, pwede nyo ipadaan sa Maya, okay, pwede nyo ipadaan sa maraming mga kuan po, mga suki, no? E-commerce ko. Okay, kung pwede mag-contact lang po, mga suki, yung mga may puso. Okay, parang patuloy-tuloy pa lang itong mga programa natin, na. Ayan. Alam nyo naman okay, maggasto. Okay, itong programa natin, mga kababayan, na. Ayan. Sana may mga ginintuan puso ba? Okay? itong mga tagapakinig natin. No? Pwede international, pwede local, pwede national, pwede regional. Okay, makatulong po sa programa mga suki. Na? Okay, katulad ng promise natin, titigil lang tayo pag okay, ang Palestine ay parang surga na po. Ay wala na silang problema po, hindi na sila mamamatay, hindi na sila makatay ng kabilang panig. No? Ayan. So yan. Okay, paano? Paalam tayo, wala tayong masamang tinapay sa kapwa. Okay, parati lang ay magbigay po ng tamang information, no? So sa tingin natin ay parang may puwang magkaroon po ng malutas ang problema yan, mga suki. Mga kababayan, pressure, okay, for two-state solution, no? Ayan. Okay, single day, no? Ay 24, ay nadali po dyan sa bakbakan po sa Camp Yunis, no? Ayan. Okay. Ito po, and then paalam na ako, no? Paalam, tapos na pala. Mag-close pala. Okay, si Professor Flo Lumumba, attorney po yun mga suki, ng bigatin po dyan sa African continent mga suki, no? Okay, isang matinding lecturer. At saka itong si Christian Amanpour po ng veterana, okay, sa broadcast journalist, no? At saka itong si Turkey, si President Tayyip Erdogan, hindi ko na matapos ang kwan niya, wala nang oras. Okay, bibitaw na po siya sa NATO organization, mga kababayan. No? Okay, mag-exit na siya. Ayan. Okay. So, isa problema po mga kababayan. No? Okay, mag-exit na. Matagal na ng miyembro po ng NATO ang Turkish government, mga suki, no? Ang bansang Turkish. Ayan. Tapos ko na ba ito? Napindot ko na ba ito? Okay, pindot na lang, no? Para sigurado. Okay, good evening. Good evening ba sa Amerika ngayon? Good evening, no? Madaling araw na at good evening. Okay, First Lady Michelle Obama, no? And former President Barack Obama. Okay, ipagpatuloy nila magkandidato, papasok sa primary election. Okay, mas maganda po mga suki, no? Okay. So, okay, good evening. Ayan. Bye-bye na. Okay, paalam tayo. This has been damahan lamang po sa gabing ito na. Okay, anong oras na? Okay, mag-alas 11 na po mga kababayan. Ayan.